managerial accounting, variance analysis, direct labor variances. Now, the first thing I want to point out about the direct labor variances is that the formulas used for direct labor variances are the same formulas used for direct materials variances. The terminology is a little different, but they're the same basic formulas. So keep that in mind as we're looking at these. Now, just as with materials, the variances we're going to want to isolate have to do with how much we paid for the labor, the rate variance, and how much of labor was used, the efficiency variance. So first let's look at the rate variance. Now, the rate variance formula is the actual labor rate that we paid per hour minus the standard labor rate per hour. Then we multiply that difference times the actual hours worked. So note the similarity to the direct materials price variance. Actual rate, actual price for materials. Standard rate, standard price for materials. Actual hours, actual quantity for materials. So same basic formula. And just like for the materials, we need to look at some data to be able to finish this out. So remember our standards. Our direct labor standard was $10 per hour for labor. So we'll plug that number into our formula. The standard rate is $10 per hour, but we also need to know what the actual pay rate was, what was actually recorded in payroll. So once again, pull up my little sheet with the data here. The actual labor information, we actually worked 23,000 labor hours, and we actually paid those employees an average labor rate of $9.90. So we're going to need both pieces of this information. Actual hours, 23,000, actual pay rate, $9.90 on average. So we now plug that information into our formula, and we can figure out what the overall rate variance was. So actual rate was $9.90 per hour minus the standard rate of $10 per hour. So we've got a 10-cent per hour average savings on labor, and we actually worked 23,000 hours. So 10 cents times 23,000 hours, the net labor rate variance is 2,300, and since we paid less than the standard called for, that's going to be a favorable variance. Now, labor rates per individual employee aren't going to vary that much within a year's time, and certainly not within a month's time for this data. So what usually causes labor rates on average to differ from the standard is scheduling of employees. In this case, we may have, since the rate is lower, we may have scheduled more lower skilled, lower paid employees relative to high skilled, high paid employees than we had planned in developing the standard. If, say, we planned 50-50 skilled and low skilled, and actually we scheduled 60% low skilled and 40% high skilled, then that's going to drive our average wage rate down. So scheduling is usually the underlying cause of a labor rate variance. There may be other things. If this had been an unfavorable, it could have been due to working more overtime than planned, and that overtime may have been due to a rush order or a machine malfunction that caused us not to be able to get as much produced as we wanted to, and then once the machine was up, we had to work overtime to get caught up. So there are lots of things that are interacting that may impact that average labor rate. But usually it's scheduling. Now, who does labor scheduling? The production manager, the plant manager does the scheduling. So this is going to be the responsibility of production. So initially, in scheduling perhaps more lower skilled workers who make less per hour than the standard called for, they saved $2,300. But that could have an impact on efficiency. So we're going to look at the efficiency variance next.